Welcome to Crunching Tackles, where we break down the hardest hitting social issues in sports. On today's show, the president of FIFA is under tremendous pressure after he launched and then walked back a plan to sell off the world's game to a private equity firm. My name is Chad Wiley, and with me, as always, is he running for president of FIFA? It's John Nekrasov. Are you?
Yes, I am. Of course. Of course I am. And I would like you to run with me. We're going to take over FIFA together. And, maybe we'll make a buck or few along the way.
John, on the last podcast we talked, which we just finished recording, we ended it by talking about some of the good vibes around the World Cup. And the good vibes, unfortunately, around FIFA have not lasted because after just one of the most successful global sports tournaments in the history of the world, Gianni Infantino shoots himself in the foot by launching just a shocking plan that we're going to break down today. We're going to talk about this plan, the backlash to it, and really like the future of Gianni Infantino as the leader of the world's game, which now seems to be in serious jeopardy. But how do you want to go about setting the stage for this story that has really kind of eclipsed many of the good vibes that we had about the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, this is just to me a saga of Greek mythology proportions of hubris. That's really what this is about. It's about.
So you're saying it's going to be a Christopher Nolan movie in 20 years?
It should be. It should be. I do think that I'm surprised there hasn't been a FIFA Sepp Blatter movie. To be honest, maybe it's because things are still ongoing behind the scenes or whatever. The Gianni Infantino movie is going to be absolutely incredible. I would love to see Stanley Tucci as Gianni Infantino.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my celebrity casting. I think that there's so much to talk through here. And I think what I really would love to do is kind of give everyone, there are so many details here at a very nuanced level in terms of moving finance and dollars around to make this happen, that I think if you're like really into the weeds on this, you can go read about. But I would love to give everyone a kind of a high level overview of what's going on, why Infantino wanted to do this, why there's so much backlash around it, and then we can kind of talk about the legacy, not the legacy, but kind of what's going to happen from here and what it will mean for Gianni. Because on its face, I think we do have to, as we start talking about this, talk about the fact that like what Gianni was trying to do is very similar to the structure of a lot of American sports leagues. It's not that different, right? And so I think that there is a lot going on here in terms of the way FIFA is structured, in terms of the way soccer is structured as a whole, that will give you guys, if you're not like deep in the weeds of soccer, a lot of insights into what makes the structure of soccer unique, and also just why what Infantino was trying to do was so diabolically evil.
Yeah, I want to start with this. Right after the World Cup, FIFA touted that they generated $15 billion in revenue from the 2026 World Cup, the most lucrative World Cup in history. So this is not, a poor man's FIFA. This is FIFA and Gianni Infantino coming off of just weeks after one of the most successful and financially lucrative tournaments ever. And how does Gianni Infantino respond? He certainly is feeling a level of invincibility and a level of just complete defiance when he announces a plan to create a new body that would be the event organizer and essentially the governor of FIFA. And he would sell a minority stake of that body to a private equity firm led by Joshua Kushner, who's the brother of Jared Kushner, the son-in-law to President Donald Trump. This company would pay FIFA about $4 billion for a minority stake, and then would have actual voting power in the operations and organization and decision-making of FIFA, governing the world's game on a day-to-day, week-to-week year-to-year basis. Um, it was just a brazen plan. You mentioned the Greek mythology, it really comes from the hubris of flying too close to the sun, right?
Yeah,
Gianni
it does.
Infantino was feeling himself to such a degree that he must have thought that this would be an accepted plan.
Yeah, I do. I think he thought so, and I think to again, I think we need to take a step back here and talk about how FIFA works. For those of you who may not be super familiar with the structure of FIFA, so FIFA is the governing body of world soccer. It is made up of basically federations of individual soccer federations for each country that it's as a member of it. I believe there are 211, and they are structured into continental federations. So there's CONCACAF, which is North America. There's CONMEBOL, which is South America. There's CAF, I believe, which is the African Federation. There's UEFA, which is the European Federation. There's AFC, which is Asia, and then there's the Oceanian Federation. And
Wow,
together,
good job.
those governing bodies, that's important for the context of what we're talking about. Those governing bodies are kind of independent subsidiaries of FIFA that are governed completely independently, but also report up to FIFA in a certain kind of way. And then those individual country federations all report up both to those smaller confederations continentally and also up to FIFA.
Report up to, but also have some oversight over. For example,
Right.
like the countries and the federations elect the FIFA president and have some power.
Exactly. And so what's interesting is often these countries will vote as blocks, kind of by continent or by regional affiliation. In FIFA matters, specifically in presidential elections and things of that nature, each country has one vote. So no matter how powerful you are, a Spain has as many votes as, not to pick on anyone in particular, but like a Madagascar. And so Infantino's strategy to keep himself in power since the stepladder corruption crisis of the mid 2010s, when the president was removed basically for accepting bribes in exchange for giving the World Cup to Russia and Qatar. Since then, Infantino has figured out a kind of genius strategy, honestly, which is that if you take the revenues that FIFA gets and then break off small chunks of that and give that money away to small countries that don't have a lot of money to invest in soccer or, pay executives of the soccer federations, then those countries are naturally going to be in your pocket to vote for you as president and vote for everything you want. And so even though Europe, which has kind of the central power of soccer on a global level, even though Europe has a lot of clout and is definitely the most powerful federation, it does not have enough votes to actually make world governing decisions in FIFA. And so what Infantino has figured out is if he can kind of buy off enough small countries around the world, he can actually basically outbalance kind of the desires of the people who actually kind of up to this point have really governed the game of soccer. And that's kind of how we get here is Infantino has built this power structure. It just keeps being reelected as president. And he gets to this point where he says, I'm literally untouchable. Everyone loves me. Everyone gets money from me. And this proposal, basically, he announced it and basically was like, everyone has like a month or two to stand by this decision that I'm making. Or, and if you do, you're going to get a ton of money. You're going to get $40 million per country. If you don't, you'll still get some money, but it'll be less because you'll be cut out of the deal because you didn't support me. And that is when things really start getting serious.
I mean, what you just described is a bribe, right? If
Yeah,
you
of
vote
course.
for
Of course
if
it
you
is.
vote for me, you get double the money.
Yep.
Basically, like if this happens and if this company, this private equity does bring $4 billion into soccer, you will get more of it if you agree with my plan and less of it if you disagree with my plan. That is essentially the bribe. I would like to like briefly talk about like what actually is this like FIFA Forward Enterprises like what was this private equity fund allegedly or like in theory buying into, and how would it actually change the day-to-day operation of football?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think we should spend a good amount of time there. Um, I think the what stuck out to me when they announced the plan was, FIFA is technically a nonprofit organization. I did a bunch of reading prepping for this, both in the Athletic and the ESPN, just to cite my sources, in the Guardian as well. FIFA is a nonprofit organization, ostensibly. They're kind of considered a custodian of the game of soccer, but also obviously make a ton of money, which, a good amount of that goes to Gianni Infantino himself. Um, Essentially, what this was attempting to do was, like you said earlier, spin off the vehicle that actually hosts the World Cup and the Club World Cup, and presumably other expanded tournaments beyond just those two, and basically increase the amount of money that's coming into FIFA. I'm assuming turn it into a for-profit mechanism of some kind, but as it seems, it would still be under nonprofit status while taking in private equity money and then turning out revenues for FIFA to supposedly give toward the benefit of the game, but presumably, giving pittances to each country and then pocketing the rest of it. Um, all of it, to me, and I'm curious what you think. I think the idea is twofold. One is generating revenue, and then the other is essentially spinning up a competition to the power that UEFA has at the club level and at the international level. When you look at the way soccer is structured right now, the biggest kind of competitions that matter on the world stage are the World Cup, the Euro, which is the international European equivalent to the World Cup run by UEFA, the UEFA Champions League, which is a yearly competition with all the clubs that Infantino is really jealous of, and that's why the Club World Cup exists in the format that it does, and then the Premier League. Like, those are the four kind of money-making dominant forces in world soccer. One of them, and along with other domestic leagues, is run by England specifically and makes tons of money. The other two are run by Europe's federation in different ways. And interestingly, I learned today that the Champions League is actually run by it's not sold off to private equity, but it is run by a spun off kind of business entity. So there's some precedent for a model like this in soccer. Infantino basically only has the World Cup at this point as a money-making venture. And he says, this is every 4 years. What gives? Why can't I have more? And I think that's at least how I start to think about where this is coming from. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this plan fundamentally changes the nature of FIFA's relationship to its own interests, right?
Yeah.
FIFA, like you said, is a nonprofit steward of the global game. And that's an important role for FIFA to have. And essentially what this plan would do would be changing FIFA. It would be the interests of soccer would become, like any for-profit corporation, the appeasement of shareholders, where now FIFA is no longer primarily responsible to the the federations of countries and continents, but is actually responsible to the group of minority shareholders who have invested in an asset that they expect to generate a profit, as
Right.
all for-profit assets are. And so even if I don't think you should think of this as all of a sudden Joshua Kushner is voting on who hosts the World Cup. Like, that's not how it would actually happen tangibly, but it does change. It would have fundamentally changed the interests of FIFA and the rationale for the decisions that they were making in ways that were to, I think, thankfully to many of the countries, but also to you and I hope the average soccer fan, but also just citizens of the world in good standing, a very, very odorous idea. And so On top of that, you mentioned, Gianni's lack of personal control over that. It would also be remiss for me to not mention that in the Times report, they reported that the current plan was for Gianni Infantino to become the commissioner of this new group after his FIFA presidency would end. And the reported salary that Gianni Infantino would receive as FFE commissioner would be approximately $64 million a year.
That seems fair to me. I see nothing wrong with that.
$64 million a year. So, I mean, that's why Gianni wanted to do this. Like, let's be honest. But that's just an outrageous sum. That is a crazy amount of money. And so, with all that in mind, that is the setup here. That's the pledge, and now let's get to the prestige, because the prestige, John, thankfully, was some of the most surprising to me, but unanimous disapproval and threats against FIFA. It was essentially a coup, the likes of which I don't know if we've ever seen in FIFA before or in a sports body before. It started, John, with UEFA. Every single member of UEFA, which is the continent of Europe, so the most powerful confederation. You mentioned every country gets the same vote, so they're technically not the most powerful, but in terms of like soft power, the prestige of the countries involved, the amounts of trophies these countries have, the quality of their leagues, like UEFA is the top conference in FIFA, and every single member of UEFA signed a pledge to boycott any FIFA event, including the World Cup, if this plan went into place.
That they did. And I mean, this literally has been a coup. And the only comparison that I can think of that is even on remotely close to this level is the Super League of a few years back. And I think that's a very interesting comparison point to make in terms of what happened here. I was listening to the Libero podcast, which is a bunch of British journos who did an episode on this as well, and they were talking about how, in some ways, this whole story is really a power struggle between UEFA and FIFA, and so because of that, I think this is actually a very fitting start to this coup. Shortly after that boycott was announced, the North American Federation, CONCACAF, announced that they were rejecting Infantino's proposal unilaterally. And that was enough, even as kind of other figures started to condemn it, but, not universally in confederation format. That was enough to prove to Gianni that he was not going to get this past a FIFA vote, and he backed down. But I think what's interesting, like, the Super League was a bunch of powerful clubs, so like the most powerful clubs in European soccer, banding together to try to break the power of UEFA and take organization into their own hands and do their own thing. And interestingly, both at a grassroots level and a UEFA level, they failed. Some of the ideas of the Super League were co-opted into the current Champions League model. UEFA outlasts the Super League and outlasts the clubs, and everyone kind of continues in the ecosystem that they exist in currently. It's fascinating to me that FIFA tried a very similar thing. Infantino would love the Club World Cup to replace the Champions League. If he could do it every year, he totally would. And what we're seeing is UEFA has a lot of sticking power. Again, UEFA outlasts another attempt to remake soccer. The Club World Cup in 2029, that would be the next one. Right now, from what I've read, is basically like unconfirmed. It seems like the future of the Club World Cup is riding on Infantino's presidency, from what I was reading in The Athletic recently. And I think that the European conference, if you will, to put it in American terms, is flexing its muscles on the world stage right now. And basically, I mean, I think this is like, it's easy to really moralize about this because I think Infantino and FIFA are like the worst possible actors. But what's interesting here is like UEFA are not like benign, super like great people who are brilliant custodians of the game who love soccer. Like they're commercializing everything and, making things expensive for fans and all the things. But they know that they do have legacy power in a way that FIFA in this iteration does not have. And I think it's really showing.
Yeah, I mean, morale, and when we're talking about these types of actors, morality is graded on a curve, right?
Right.
We just have to acknowledge
Genuinely.
that. It seemed like UEFA was the first to say, like, unequivocally, we're going to be boycotting any FIFA event. And it seemed like at that point, Gianni was at least interested in trying to ride the wave and survive UEFA. And that kind of makes me wonder, John, to what extent Gianni was betting on CONCACAF and specifically Donald Trump to help him see this through. Because when CONCACAF came out against this, he almost immediately folded.
Yeah, he
And,
did.
Trump and Gianni have been very visible together throughout the summer and last summer. Gianni, of course, gave Trump the FIFA Peace Prize, and they presented the trophy together, and they've said nice things about each other. And I do wonder if a significant part of Gianni's plan was just hoping that Trump would apply pressure on his behalf to CONCACAF and then to the rest of the world to accept this plan. And I don't know if Donald Trump would have had that much power in the first place, but even if he did, I think Gianni Infantino greatly overrated Trump's loyalty and friendship because
Which is something many have done.
Many have made this mistake, but like Trump has really left him out to dry. And there have been some reporting that he's been like trying to get a hold of Donald Trump to basically save his job as president of FIFA. And from reporting like the New York Post, Trump seems fairly uninterested in taking those calls. Like I don't know. Like this little like summer long bromance the two have had seems like it could be over. And I think Gianni might have greatly misjudged Trump and also greatly miscalculated how much Trump would possibly help him in this situation.
I mean, I just think what's funny is that Infantino showed up in a situation where he tried a manipulator off against Donald Trump and said, which one of us can look out the most for our own interests? And Trump obviously was interested in bolstering the image of the U.S. and his own personal image, as he does by buddying up with Infantino and hosting the World Cup and having a great time. He clearly had a tremendous time on stage with Rodri holding the World Cup trophy. But if you know anything about Trump, regardless of your political opinions or persuasions, Trump is not interested in losers. And he's also certainly not someone who feels the need to stick up for people when it does not suit him. And Infantino clearly felt that given that he gave Trump a peace prize and let him dance with the World Cup, that Trump now owed him some kind of loyalty, much like the little federations that, he gives handouts to. And I think Trump clearly saw that Infantino's usefulness had expired its shelf life and has left him out to dry. And Infantino is definitely like felt that he was the senior partner in the situation, while in reality, in this kind of power play, is most definitely the junior partner. And there's a reason that he was FIFA president and not a real president.
As the Princess Bride would say, he committed one of the great blunders.
Yeah, he really did. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think that like the Gianni Infantino trajectory here kind of makes sense to me, right?
Totally.
He rubs shoulders with Trump. He gets really hyped up on his own power after this amazing World Cup, and he decides to throw every chip he has on the table in an incredibly over leveraged moment that backfires horribly. And really what happened was three continents very quickly shut it down, like UEFA first, and then it was North America and CONCACAF, and then the Asian Federation came out very much against it. Those three federations on their own would have been enough of a majority to sink it entirely. CONMEBOL was going to meet, or like they had maybe said they wanted to have more conversation, but no one. I guess one of the things that surprised me the most is that Gianni did not announce this project with the security with the federation with him. Like he didn't have any allies. Like when the Super League was announced, there were teams who were already committed to being a part of it, right?
That's correct.
And that was part of like why it actually had some traction is because it had the credibility of actual support. And Johnny didn't have any support when he launched this plan. He basically went out on a limb by himself and just hoped that people would come to him. And nobody did. Some people came out strongly against him, and some people kind of just like stayed neutral and wanted to see which way the wind blew. And ultimately, this entire scheme lasts for less than a week before FIFA completely do a full 180. And so this plan is now completely scrapped, like I mentioned in the intro. And now the only question left is, does Gianni Infantino have any credibility to remain president of FIFA? It seemed like up until last week, he was going to be running unopposed in the election, which is supposed to take place like in March of next year, like March of 2027. And now it seems like he is going to face a tremendous amount of opposition. I don't know if he's like the favorite to be FIFA president or not, but UEFA seems like the entire UEFA Federation seem against him. I saw that the English FA were pulling their letter of support that they had originally written supporting Gianni's candidacy. The Jordan president basically said that he wanted Gianni to resign. And so like he went from the head the senior statesman of the most successful World Cup in history to fighting for his job in the span of a month. Less than a month.
Yeah.
It's in 3 weeks. 2
I would
weeks.
like to add, so the interesting thing about what Infantino did here was that he did not, to your point, he didn't enlist support. In fact, he hid this proposal from his kind of closest crew because he knew it was such a diabolical idea, and he was just hoping that the people he was paying off would support it once it got out in the open. Arsene Wenger, who kind of has a prominent role within FIFA, Carlos Cordero, who was Johnny's kind of financial right-hand man, General Secretary of FIFA, Matthias Grafstrom, all have basically come out and been like, we do not support this idea in any way, and it's a terrible idea. And you mentioned the Jordanian Football Association president, Prince Ali bin Al Hussein, has said on the record on Twitter as of today that FIFA basically indicated to him verbally during the World Cup that Jordan would only receive financial support from FIFA as promised through all of Infantino's promises if they voted for Gianni in the presidential election next year. So there are like quid pro quos going on behind the scenes in FIFA, I'm sure, with all of these small countries, where Infantino is basically strong-arming federations that don't have the money to support themselves to vote for him in exchange for, survival, essentially, or just continuing to grow. And that's a lot of leverage. But now it's clear that people all of a sudden have the boldness to be like, things are rotten in the state of Denmark, or in this situation in the House of FIFA. I think at this point, I would be really surprised if Infantino gets reelected. I really would.
So, I mean, like of the plausible paths, right? Like we could come back on a podcast in 2 weeks and he's resigned. Like he's been forced out.
Genuinely.
Like that's a possibility. Or he defiantly stays on, runs for re-election and loses. Or maybe this blows over by next year and then he holds on to the presidency. Which of those seem like the most likely to you?
I think I would be surprised if he stays on, just because I think people are now incentivized to look for dirt. And like what happened with Sepp Blatter, this is not a legal statement, but I am sure that things have gone on under the surface at FIFA that are at the very least legally questionable, and given that, I think that if whistleblowers at high levels are willing to start talking, I don't think Infantino lasts. And the question is really like, is the Jordanian FA president kind of the first of many? Because if that's true, I don't think Gianni even lasts till the election. I think to me, FIFA is reeling right now. Um, and I think it would take a real PR masterclass from Gianni to be able to keep his job come the election, but especially in an election.
Yeah, I think I'd be really surprised if he is FIFA president by New Year's.
Which is just like it's a Greek myth, tale of hubris. It's unbelievable.
It is one of the most like crazy own goals, like highest to lowest moments ever, right? Like he was on top of the world 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He was untouchable.
Pride cometh before a fall,
And what
as
a
the
fall
scripture
it is.
saith.
Yeah, what a fall it has been. I guess like as we kind of reflect on this, you are right to point out that you are 100% right to point out that UEFA and the other federations are not coming at this perspective from the ultimate moral good. But it is nice to see that these short-term quick money scheme cash grabs don't work all the time, right? Like that
Yeah.
is still it's a small win, but it is a win.
Sports
And
washing fails. This
yeah,
fails.
right. And like it's not because UEFA are being guided by the best angels in the world, but it is enough to say that like when enough people say, "Hey, this goes against the spirit of this sport, and this is not how football is supposed to be run, and this is not coming from a place of the values of this game," that still does have in some ways more power than these uber greedy, uber capitalistic, uber corporate schemes that these people are bringing in. And so I think that's an encouragement, that a silver lining that I'll take from this. Um, but man, like I did not think that at the end of the World Cup final that this was the story we'd be talking about to
2 weeks
cap
later,
off the World Cup.
literally 2 weeks later, I think that like I think that what's interesting here is sports. We always talk about this. Sports are always complicated. There's always moral questions. Sports are about making money. When we look at ownership of actual clubs, like tons of clubs are owned by private equity. This is not new, right? Private equity being present in the sports world is literally like completely old news at this point. Um, but I think that's because like those units are money making units ultimately. And FIFA has been different because FIFA basically is just charged with operating the rules of soccer and putting on the World Cup every so often. And Infantino wanted it to be more than that. And it has become more than that. But I think it's become more than that in a destructive way. And there are so many ways that it is destructive. One of them is that, the World Cup is amazing. The World Cup was amazing in spite of FIFA. The World Cup has always been awesome. Um, but everything that the World Cup did differently at this tournament in general made the World Cup worse. From hydration breaks to vastly overinflated prices. Like the fan experience is the fan experience because of the fans of soccer around the world. And FIFA in soccer in general, the people who control soccer don't really care because they want to make money. And FIFA, even more egregiously than everyone else, wants to make even more money and take the tiny sliver of games that they've been given and entrusted with and make it all about giving Gianni Infantino more money. And there, as you've said many times over this summer, there's no reason that we need to sign on to that. Like Gianni Infantino's salary is not something that I care about. And, the salary of FIFA executives is certainly not something I care about. The joy of sports is as much as we can have it about all of us experiencing something as a community, as a nation, as a human race together. And everything that happened in this proposal was trying to diminish that yet again.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled that it's failing. But also, there's always more of these money making schemes, and sports are about money, and that's
Of course.
also just part of the reality of the world. But we take the wins.
Is Arsene Wenger the next FIFA president?
That's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought about that yet. I think it's possible.
He's like this, isn't he? I would say I would describe him as like the senior statesman of world football to a certain degree.
I think that actually would be like the least surprising thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're like
Yeah.
not to get like I don't want like FIFA need a president now in the way that like the Catholics needed a good pope after like
Yeah.
all of, like the priest abuse scandal. Like you just need someone to come in and like do like the bare minimum of just decency to just right the ship, right? Like
Yep.
you just need someone who can just protect their reputation, just meet the minimum threshold of not being openly corrupt. Like that's the bar.
Don't you love it when that's the bar?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes that is the bar, but like, I do think they need a figure who can come in with like some like real credibility and say like, hey,
Right.
like it is okay. We're gonna get through this and we're gonna be okay. And he might be a good candidate for that, genuinely.
It would be astonishing if FIFA had a president that was not openly corrupt. I've never experienced that before. So in my entire lifetime. So that would
Sep,
be it'd be interesting.
Sep or Gianni, who you going with? Who's your guy?
And that's what everyone's been saying this entire World Cup cycle, but it would be unique to experience something different. That's
Yeah,
what I'm going to say.
yeah. Anything else on this, John? As I think now we do put like a full. I think this is like the bookend of our FIFA summer.
Yeah, it's been a summer of FIFA in many ways. I would say for good and for ill. And I'm always glad for the soap opera that international soccer is because it keeps us entertained. But also I'm glad that we're all collectively fighting back. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm like we've had some time off from the club game, and I don't know that I've ever been more excited for a club season. I don't know how you're feeling about getting back into all the sports, but like I am I am in the most soccer time of my life in a long, long time,
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk
which is saying a
about.
lot for me.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Premier League, I'm sure, a lot in the next 9 months of our lives here on this podcast. I would just say, like, this Premier League season feels very open.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of teams with lots of big teams with new managers, lots of teams with like I think the defending champions have not reloaded fully, and they were
We're
not.
working.
I think so. I
We're
think so, but
working.
like it's not nothing's happened yet for you guys
No.
yet, and Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester City, new managers there. United have, I think, had a very successful summer in the transfer window. So I think there are like legitimately five teams that you can make a case to win the Premier League. And
Right.
when was the last time we were able to say that?
I know.
I think it's gonna be a fun season.
We're going to do an emergency podcast when Vinicius Jr. signs for Arsenal in a week, but we won't get ahead of ourselves.
That'll be a John Solo pod.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to handle that one. But yeah, I mean,
You heard it here first, guys.
obviously, like I asked you at the beginning of the last podcast if you'd watched any sports since the World Cup, and you said no. And obviously, this is like a slower time. But as we
Right.
get into Premier League and then NFL and then U.S. Open, like we're really getting into, and then then LeBron's playing regular season games for the Sixers, and I do think like the World Cup is uniquely special. I already miss
Yeah.
it. I said that already. I
Me too.
already missed the World Cup, but the sports calendar is the gift that quite literally never stops giving. And we're going to be just fine.
I know all those greedy businessmen always trying to get us to keep watching, and somehow we always do. That's our blessing and our curse, Chad.
We always do. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen. If you missed our last podcast, we did a sports roundup. I mentioned on that podcast, we're doing more frequent but shorter episodes that are hopefully more focused on one topic and less wandery, and also are under an hour. And so we're 2 for 2, John. Mission accomplished. We're doing it.
I know this one was like really nice and short.
Yeah, so just enough for you guys to really get to the gist of the situation and know what we think on it. So please feel free to interact with us if you like the new format. If you were really enjoying the 90-minute pods and you want us to go back, let us know. Although based on the feedback I've gotten, I highly doubt that. But yeah, please do give us any feedback you have on who you think the next FIFA president will be, and any topic you'd like to hear us discuss in the future. And until next time, we will be back soon with another podcast on a topic that will be about sports and will also most likely be about culture, and most likely might also be about movies sometimes. We hope that you all continue to be well and be safe, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Cheers, guys.